Welcome everybody to our first 2021 edition of the Good Deeds No Investing podcast. I am your co-host, Chris Seveney, along with Jamie Bateman. And today we have a special guest with us. We have Richard McGrew from Prominent Funding. But Richard is also an investor who, like me, loves systems. Richard's been investing in notes for 4 or 5 years now. He's been in the software industry for 20 plus years. He's a father. He's an avid individual who likes to get up early. So he's recording this at 5 o'clock a.m. on the West Coast. But he's somebody who we want to have on the show because really exemplifies how you can scale a business working full time if you have the systems in place. And he's created a note system for investors who are looking to scale. And Jamie is one of his clients. So I want to thank you, Richard, for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Jamie, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Chris. Yeah.
Did you sleep well?
I slept pretty well. Yes, I did. Just kind of focused on the new year and ready to put 2020 behind us.
So I was 3-1 in my pitch games last night, just so you know.
Okay.
So it was a good night last night compared to the last time we played.
Good, yeah. I was going to ask you that if you're still doing the card games on Thursday
we
nights.
do. Thursday nights, we play cards with some buddies from college on this app called Trickster. So, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So, Richard, I did a kind of brief intro. Why don't you, talk a little bit more about yourself and also kind of break into a little bit more on, what you created, why you created it. And, we'll get into, I've got a million questions for you, but we'll talk about how it can help investors from that perspective.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me on again. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I've been doing this for, you said, I guess, I've been doing this for a few years now. And, I'm a father and a husband and a serial entrepreneur. I'm always trying something new. And I've got a couple of different businesses running in the software space. I started in note investing about 4 years ago, trying to figure out how to accelerate my retirement out of the corporate world. I've been there 20 years, 20 plus years writing software and managing big teams. And, I realized that the note investing space was an interesting space to get involved in and that it could be scaled quite well with, partnerships and proper setup. As I started to invest, I realized that there's a lot of details to track. There's a lot going on and a lot of different people you have to interact with. There's, every note is completely different, right? That's like having a bunch of kids, right? Each kid is completely different no matter who the parents are, right? And so I realized.
I just, sorry to cut you off.
No, it's good.
Often compare the dealing with borrowers with parenting. So there are a lot of similarities there.
Absolutely, right? And counties and everything else, right? It's all unique, and which is what makes it interesting, but it also makes it difficult to track. And so I knew right away I needed some sort of system to manage that, and I started working on some software to do that. About a year in, I was at a note conference listening to a bunch of folks talk about the problems they were having. They did these panels talking about, what everybody get together, talk about what your key problems are, and then come back and share with the audience. So at the end of that, I was just shocked that everybody had the more or less same problem. And it was around organization and how do they manage their business and how many different things there are to keep track of. And I was sitting there at first, I was kind of shocked because it didn't seem that difficult. And I'm not trying to pump myself up. I'm just saying it didn't seem like tracking all this was that big of a problem for me. And I had 34 notes. I didn't think it was that hard. So I started noodling on it and I realized that most of them are using paper stacks and, stacks of paper, not paper stack, the site that didn't exist back then.
Right.
But they were also using Post-it notes and 14 different versions of Excel, 14 different Excel files, and they had a lot of stuff going on, right? Yeah. And I thought, but boy, and that's just not the way to do it. I mean, why don't you guys use this? And nobody had heard of what I was doing, and I thought, well, yeah, it's because I haven't shared it with anybody. So I've built a system. It's Note Rules is the name of the system. And basically, people put their data into the system. And honestly, I can't imagine running a note business using um, Excel and paper, or even using these fancy servicing packages that are out there that are meant for servicers. That's more information. I know, right? But there's so much information in there. How do you keep track of what you're doing? I think we need very, very simple workflow and very, very simple step by step. This is what you need to get done. And everything else, and as long as you have access to that data, you can be anywhere in the world and manage your note business and know what's important.
A few things that I took away from that are, and it's kind of just, it's hit me in the past, but really hit me and exemplified when you start out saying this. To be successful in note investing, or not to be successful, those who I think grasp the concept much faster are those with project management experience, because each note is like a project,
Yeah.
or its own individual business or entity in that sense. So that's where, again, I come from a construction background, running projects and stuff, and kind of treat each note separately, almost like a subcontractor or a small project. So that's one thing. And then two, you've already touched upon the systems and so forth. And you're right, there's not that entry kind of level system. People, I used to try and use a CRM system. I tried, then I used, what's that, Excel database one online. That was pretty cool and stuff. Not Smart Sheets, but there was another one I can't think of right now. I mean, I'll be honest, yes, now I do use the servicing software because I do have 250 plus notes. But it's also, I mean, I've got $20,000 invested into that. So, somebody starting out, I would tell you,
Yes.
don't go invest $10,000 or $20,000 in software to, start a note business, because unless you're buying $1 million+ in pools, you go buy an asset for 20 grand and you're spending 10 on software, you're not going to get 50% return to cover that cost, unlike what some people may preach to you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you're going to run a really large note business, you probably have the money to be able to fund custom software,
Yep.
right? Which is what you've done, and that's awesome. And all the really, really big note investors eventually wind up funding custom software because you have big systems and lots of team members.
Yep.
My software is targeted at someplace between, I have two main packages, right? One targeted at new investors and one targeted at folks more like Jamie that are scaling out their business. They've got 20+ notes and they want to go get into automated messaging and automated service or data collection and get rid of some of the manual steps involved in managing each note.
Yeah. So Richard, if you don't mind, just jump in. So I've mentioned this before in the podcast, and it's not my idea at all, but most businesses, including the note business, really come down to three things: deal flow, sourcing, and asset management, right? So sourcing of deals and then sourcing of money, two separate things, and then asset management. So what you've come up with and what you work on is the third part, which is asset management, which is often overlooked, I think, by newer note investors. So just framing it in that way, what level of what number of notes would you say is kind of the breaking point where you need something like what you offer? Would you say it's 2 notes, 10 notes, 20 notes?
That's a great question. So it depends on who you are, right? If you are an investor that is looking to buy 2 notes and that's it, you're going to treat it like a completely passive job. The servicer is going to do everything for you, and you just want to get the money, and you're going to buy a super high quality note, then you don't need software, right? Excel is fine, or even Post-it notes and paper is fine for a business of that size. If you think you might want to scale, then I think you need software from the very beginning. I don't think you should wait. I think you should put a system in place. If you think you're going to try to get to 10 notes or more, you absolutely need software. I know my first note, you guys probably have the same story. My first note, I can still tell you where it is, who the borrower was, how many beds and baths it was, what the community was like, what the house looks like, what the acreage. I can tell you everything about that first note. But once I got to 3 or 4, they started to get pretty jumbled in my head. Right. And in software, without software, there's no way you can manage a note business effectively.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. It's more about where you're headed than where you currently are.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because, the software also can, because in today's world, there is information overload. And note investing, I think, is one of those businesses that does have that information overload, where there's so much information that's out there. But once, like when you go to buy a note, yes, you want to know acreage, location, beds, baths, after you buy that note, you really don't actually care about that, information
That's right.
essentially, because you're focused on other aspects. And that's what's great about systems that you set up is, you can customize them, and like you have with your system early on, because I know yours goes through the whole due diligence process as well. You can focus early on certain tasks. And then once those tasks are complete, and then you go to the management, those important kind of tasks kind of are still there, but they're in the back end, and it focuses more on the important tasks now. So, and it highlights those, which during key points. So I think that's critical as part of any system.
That is a good point. And just to follow up, I know in the beginning, a lot of newer note investors they want that due diligence checklist, right? What is the checklist, and obviously everyone kind of has to create their own and tweak it and do what's right for their business. But that's something that, Richard, you can speak to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an app in our solution that we call the Purchase app. Actually, we're upgrading it to be the Transactions app, because it turns out that those transactions, those activities in the due diligence are almost completely repeated during the sale of an asset. So the flow is very, very similar. We've gotten a lot of user feedback that we need to cover both cases. But the bottom line, is when you go to buy an asset or sell an asset, you've got a lot of due diligence you have to get through, and it's not hard. You can download a checklist off of Bigger Pockets, or you can talk to Chris and Jamie. You can find the information on how to get through a transaction, but remembering to do it, and that you got it done, and then when it's completed, what did you complete? In our system, it gives you simple locations for tracking for due diligence. For example, on the tax reporting, after you call the county, you got all your notes. 2 years from now, when you're trying to figure out why you're getting a tax bill, you can go back and pull up your due diligence and see, oh yeah, that's right, there wasn't past due tax bill on this, and we chose not to pay it because of this and that scenario. And so also, I find if you don't have that stuff put down in your system, you wind up going back to that collateral file over and over and over. And each time, that's another 15 minutes of your life lost, another 20 minutes of your life spent chasing data that you already had and you should have had at your fingertips. Instead, you wasted your time trying to do it. Or worse, you lost it and you can't find that data anymore.
Well, it's also like, you think with one note, that's easy to remember, but for example, I've got notes that are, I have 2 notes, for example, that are on a 6th Street in 2 different locations. I confuse which one's which all the time.
Oh,
If you're
yeah.
doing due diligence and you get a tape and you're doing due diligence on 10 assets, and there's 2 borrowers named Smith, just picking that name because it's the most common name in the US. Or 2 John Does, whatever it is. It's like, oh, is this one or this? Trust me, you'll confuse them. And then it's like,
I had 2.
One of them owed taxes, one of them was this. So
I had 2 Vermont streets before I had 10 loans, which was crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we are so Richard too, we are recording this video. So if you do want to share a screen to show some things on the screen too, and talk about it. I mean, this does get audio recording, but also we do the video too. If you ever want to share the screen or talk about something, we can do that as well. Just want to, mention that to you.
Yeah, be happy to.
So you've kind of created this system, and you customized it for yourself, but also now have gone out there and marketing it, just so people listen. It's a Podio-based system, correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And we chose Podio. The primary reason for choosing Podio is the ability to connect with everything else out there. Right. It would be relatively simple for us to turn around and make this off of our own custom system.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I haven't been in the note business that long, but I've talked to a lot of folks that have. And vendors come and go in this industry. We chose to go with a really large company. Citrix is pretty darn big, which is who owns Podio. If anything were to happen to me or to my business, Podio is still going to be there. Our systems are still going to be there, and there's nothing about what I'm doing that would block my customers from continuing to move forward. So that was our primary. Uptime is super important. If you're out trying to manage your business, I didn't want to be on a custom server on a custom system that goes down, and then a customer winds up with a lines down scenario. So we're currently based off of Podio. We've heavily customized it for the scaling investors that we serve. So for someone like Jamie or yourself, if you were to choose to jump over, not at all an advertisement, um, um, we have a bunch of automation that helps our customers do things like automated outreach to their customer base and their leads, and other things like that. So that connection is a huge value add that we put on top of Podio.
Well, that was one of the things that I really liked up front, was that you have different levels of service. So the first couple years for me was pretty inexpensive, and it still is. It's still a good value, but we've just recently upgraded both our Podio subscription as well as the Portfolio Activity Center under Note Rules, and so you can really tailor it to what you need. We're moving more into automating a lot of doc prep and outreach and marketing and that kind of thing that I didn't really necessarily need the first year. So
that's right. Yeah.
You can kind of cater to where you are as well, and Richard will scale along with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And also it's nice for those looking to scale. And you mentioned about getting systems earlier. The note business, everyone goes through kind of this learning curve, and it reminds me of, I'm an engineer, so I'd take calculus, and, Richard's smiling. So I remember like having to do the long way to figure out a derivative of something. And, you got to, do all this XDX and all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so now you have, if it's 2x squared, you just drop the 2, multiply by the front, and then subtract the exponent by 1. And I'm like, after they show you this long-winded way to do this and you teach it, there's like this little simple backdoor trick. And it's like, but you need that, that background of how it's done first. And what's nice about these systems is it kind of mixes the best of both worlds, and the fact that you still have to do that heavy lifting component and work your way through, but these systems do allow you just more of a tracking purpose. It's not really cheating, like, I'll say that kind of was in calculus, in the sense of, oh, you just do this, and like the simple way out. The project management component that you need, and people, I can't scream loud enough how much of a systems person I am. And, I've got, a recording I'm doing for Kimberly this weekend, and, how I can, how I stay sane with my note business, and, so forth. And it's really, truly about those systems. And, same thing with you, Richard. You're a serial entrepreneur. You've got a lot of stuff going on. You're a father, you're a kid, and you've got, 30, 40 notes, or, you had at one time or still have, and so forth. And, it's basically, I'm curious, how much time do you spend a day on your note business?
Maybe 15 minutes, depending on the situation. There's obviously days that burst over that, but I have a very organized system that tells me what to do today, and I check that. If there's nothing to do, I can move on, and it's that simple.
Yeah. So people think that, like, oh my God, I have 10 notes, I'm going to spend like 3 hours a day. If you're spending 3 hours a day, you're doing something wrong, honestly.
Yeah, you're probably going back to that paper stack, trying to check and see what you're supposed to do today, right? And
exactly.
checking each note. Yeah, it's crazy.
Jamie, you look like you're going to mention something. Go ahead.
Did you want to share your screen, Richard? Or?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, one thing I wanted to say earlier, we were talking about due diligence. As you start to scale, you wind up with multiple team members typically, right? Because there's a lot of manual steps that you can outsource. Our system is really nicely built around a chat-based system and multi-user integration, which allows all our customers to be able to share all their data seamlessly. And then, your due diligence checklist, you can check something off, and Jamie can check it tomorrow and see that it was done, or I can check it, and we get notifications that things are happening in our business, even when we're not the ones doing the work. Hey, I think, Chris, you have to enable me to share.
I just did. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, I gotta.
Yeah, this new world of Zoom control, right?
I'll tell you, the thing that drives me nuts about Zoom is the whole, like, I'll dump the passwords from the meetings and then put you in the waiting room, and then somehow it like kicks back to like reverts back to password at some point in time.
Right.
Add other meetings, it just drives me nuts.
Yeah. So I've got here on the screen a default note business that I use for my demos. There's a little bit on the screen here. I'll just walk through at a 10,000 foot level what I'm seeing when I glance at this. The blue bar here is a standard Podio address bar, which gives a ton of functionality, and obviously I won't go through any of that. But right below that, you all have your iPhone or your Android device you're used to apps. There are apps in this system that organize the data in a way that's easy to find. Below that, you can see who is working on the system and some running information down the left side around who's been in there poking around, putting data into the system.
I just had to check because I saw that first asset in there and I'm like, whoa, that looks familiar. And I actually have an asset on that street.
Mattoon, Illinois on DeWitt, really.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm like,
I'm not surprised.
whoa, it's
That's awesome. I love that town. It's great. It's I've got 2 assets in that town myself. So on the right side, there's little mini reports, if you will. And so you can see in this portfolio, there are 12 assets, 4 rentals, 4 performing notes, 2 REOs, 1 partial and 1 non-performing note. Right, so you can see an idea of what your portfolio looks like, as well as the different companies that are invested and how much money each company's got invested as a group. These are links, so you can click on any one of them and drop over to that particular company or that particular pool of assets. You can also have tasks in there. You can have how much money you're receiving each month, little reports. These are all customizable that pull the data out of your system and push it up onto your main screen.
so like under investments in the upper right, if you had JV partners, could you kind of separate it by like just JV partners got, 100,000 or,
That's basically what these are,
Okay.
right? So Prominent Funding is a company that has $580,000 in assets. Keen Funding is a company that has 183,000,
Yep.
so on and so forth. And so in each deal, each asset that you purchase, you have a company that you use to purchase that asset.
Yep.
As long as you link that up and put that in the system, these reports are automatically generated. It's just right there for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's kind of the high level. We'll talk just briefly here. We talked about workflow earlier. Let's go take a look at the what we call a purchase transaction or purchase app. This is a very simple app that walks you through the purchase activity for any asset. So at the very top, I just link up to the asset. I'll go look at that in a moment. But we have different stages of due diligence, as you guys know, right? We go through due diligence, we make an offer, we sign an agreement, we fund our asset, we go through some boarding steps, we deal with the collateral, and then we get everything recorded. And you can see for this asset that 74% of those steps are completed. Looks like the initial steps are done through due diligence, offer, PSA funding, and boarding, but we're still reviewing collateral and getting ready for recording.
And what's nice with systems like this is, like you mentioned, the collateral component. There's certain as people start buying more notes. Once you getting to the purchase and sale agreement, that's actually like the simplest part. And herding all the cats of getting the loan boarded, getting the information back and forth to the servicer, getting them the information, getting the collateral. Jamie, how long, did it take us on the last round? You and I,
we're still working on it.
Yeah, still working. I think it's been
several months.
August, September.
It was September 30th, and now it's January 8th.
Did you guys buy a pool?
I sold Jamie a bunch of crappy assets.
Nice.
You can check them out later.
Yeah. Well, definitely when you get into buying a pool and you have more than one person involved, I don't know how you would keep track of all the steps that are required to make sure you got them all done properly and checked off.
Like you said earlier, none of these steps are difficult, really.
No,
they're not.
Yeah.
But I've run into cases where either I hadn't bought, in a few weeks, or I was buying a bunch at the same time. If you're not doing something every day, it becomes a kind of a perishable skill. So I've had cases where it's like, oh wait, I forgot to check Pacer, that's not good. Or I did, truth be told, I just bought a performing asset where, should have done a better job of checking the property taxes. You kind of assume they're caught up on their payments and
they're paying. Why wouldn't they pay their taxes, right?
Right. Well, not so much. So it's not hard to check the taxes, but we just had 27,000 other things going on and kind of missed that one. So that just keeps you on track.
Or you buy 9 assets and somebody sends you 6 collateral files. But same thing. I just had that happen where I bought 11 assets and collateral files come and it looks like a big stack. So I'm like, oh, okay. Then I go through them all, and they sent me in separate cover, the allonges, the assignments, but all of a sudden it's like, okay, I got everything, but oh, wait a second, where's the 3 other files, so, and then how do you track that?
Yeah,
Where's that go?
right.
So, and these are things that for people listening, these are things you got to think of. This business is not, it's like anything in life, it's not a nice straight, road that looks like a runway. It's more like off-roading through the mountains, is how it goes. And stuff like this happens. And this is the stuff nobody teaches you. And, people talk about training and so forth. Everyone just talks about all these perfect world scenarios or some one-off things, but this is reality. And this is the stuff that, okay, how do you track this? And this is the stuff that really makes or breaks, because you can really, spend a boatload of time chasing a lot of this stuff, or you can spend, 20, $50 a month, have a system, whatever it may be, or 20,000, in regards to what, how it tracks all of your things.
Absolutely. Yeah, so let's just talk real quickly about some of the due diligence steps that you might take, right? This system is meant to be super simple to use. You can see that all these buttons here have been checked, but when you start a brand new purchase and your brand new due diligence step, you would start checking off these buttons one at a time until you finally complete all your due diligence steps. You can see here that this was done. I was at the top. I could see, we bought this note back in 2018, but I still have all my notes regarding the due diligence steps, who I talked with, the county information, the tax situation, and then my final summary on do I think this due diligence is, good enough to go ahead and purchase this asset. Go on to offer checklist. That's quite simple, but the point is, all the steps are tracked. You can see exactly where you are. And over here on the right, if there were multiple people involved in this transaction, it looks like there were not. But if there were, you would see their names in here and what they were doing. And if they made any comments, you would see all the activities in the transaction.
Yeah, and one nice thing I've really enjoyed is the fact that you, Richard, will tailor it for us.
Absolutely.
If these aren't the steps that we follow, it's as long as Podio can support it, we can tailor it to what we need. So that's
right.
Really helpful.
And it sounds like you mentioned earlier when you talked about, if, you hit the lottery and go live on some exotic beach somewhere, once this is set up, it's set it and forget it, essentially.
That's right, pretty much.
And, it's basically just Podio-based from that point on.
That's right. The basic systems that I built, anybody could build. It really comes down to, do you want to spend your time building systems or investing in notes or hanging out with your family, right? Where do you want to spend your time? But once the systems are up and running, everything's pretty much, like you said, set it and forget it. And folks can continue on without me, even if they don't need my help. I am very active. I believe this business is super valuable for folks. And so I spend a lot of my time, and my team spends a lot of their time helping folks like Jamie scale their businesses. For the average note investor that's only got a couple notes, we get them up and running, get their assets installed really quickly, get over that first, that learning hurdle is kind of painful in the very beginning with any new software. And then once they're up and running, they usually don't contact us for 6 months while they're scaling their business. And then they come back around like Jamie, where they want to, they want to generate all their contract documents and don't want to have to pay somebody or use Word merge or Excel merge, right? And they want to get more formal about how they generate their documentation, or they want to start scaling out and sending, sourcing emails to their contacts or sending letters or postcards. That's where we get back engaged again.
Yeah, one other thing, if you don't mind touching on, is I know you're doing a little bit more integration with the servicers.
Yeah.
And obviously servicers play a super key role in all of this, we all know.
Yeah.
So would you mind touching on how you're doing that?
Yeah, sure, of course. So if I share another app with you guys, there is, as you said, there's a lot of different servicers out there. And what I find myself as I run my business, you purchase an asset, you wind up with a servicer because that servicer came with the asset, right? And you have to make a decision. Do you deboard that asset and put it with some other servicer, take the risk that that the borrower is going to stop paying and use that as an excuse? Or if you're buying a non-performing note, do you want to service it with the company that's currently doing it, who's got all the background, or do you want to move it over to somebody that you trust that manages notes the way you want to manage them? the bottom line, you got all these decisions to make about how you're servicing, right? I wound up at my peak, I had 34 notes, and I had sorry, on my screen you just saw some notification from one of my customers. Sorry, so I wound up with I don't know, 6 or 7 different servicers, and so I started finding I was spending more and more time in there just tracking down what's happening at the servicers rather than, like I said, I'm spending 15 minutes a day. It started creeping up again. And so I realized I needed to start to scrape some of that data from the servicers and pull it into the portal. There's no reason in today's connected world that I should have to visit 10 different websites to track down what's going on with my portfolio. And so what I started working on was pulling that data over from Allied, from FCI, from Madison, from NAA, so on and so forth. We're currently integrated pretty well with Allied and NAA, or now I guess they're not called NAA anymore, reps, but we've got requests for FCI and Madison. We're actively looking into those. And if anybody else has a servicer that they deal with on a regular basis and it's got a few notes there, we'd be happy to integrate with them as well. That's probably
ever fixes their SSL certificate.
Yeah, we're working on that. I think we have a workaround for the short term. I'm sure that's a short-term problem for them, but yeah. So, you know, what happens basically is once we get the automation set up for you in your system, we have an app that's, oh, it's blank in this one. So let me bring up an active one. We have just going to the demo here. We have an app that allows you to see all of your payments in a long list, right? So servicers, there's 2 types of information you want to track at your servicer, right? You want to know, are you getting your payments, and are they working with the borrowers? Are they sending contact information back and forth? And so what we've put together is a simple data pull that happens once a day that pulls all the data down from your servicer login accounts and pulls them into your Podio system. And so you can see here, if I were to click on any one of these assets, you can see here this payment was received on December 1st, the principal, the interest, the advances and fees, the servicing fee, and what the actual remit value was. And then down below that, just what did the statement actually include and what were the fields. We can't, I've heard that some of the servicers change the data that's available online on a regular basis. And so the portal, you pull the data down one day, it might be different tomorrow. We have that setting available where you can choose to update it every time it changes or just pull it the one time.
And what Richard means by that is sometimes when they apply like principal interest and late fees or something, you know, they may come back and realize like, oh, you know, there was somebody, especially if someone makes like an overpayment, you know, sometimes they may credit it first to the principal and then realize there was some advances or they were short on escrow, and it kind of may, you know, based on how the loan works. And, you know, Allied, I know does that, but also you'll see on Madison for people, you know, those are 2 I use. A lot of times what Madison will do is they'll put it in reserve first. So one day it might hit reserve, and then 3 days later, they'll move it from reserve into, you know, how it should be broken down. So those are some of the things just kind of be cognizant of. And why they do that typically is, you know, the payment came in, they just need to review, make sure they're applying it correctly. Because the last thing you want is your servicer to not apply payment correctly.
That's right. Absolutely right.
So this is, I mean, this basically saves you. So Jamie, you have how many servicers? 3 you use?
Yeah, we're down to 3.
So yeah, down to 3. But I mean, for people who use multiple services, instead of, for example, like Madison, I have 7 different accounts with Madison. So it sounds like this software, basically, instead of me having to log into every single account, you know, so that'd be 7 at Madison and, you know, 1 at Allied. This basically is kind of shortcuts that to be able to see everything kind of here on this portal.
I'm also thinking Debbie might really like this if we get it, you know, 100% up and running across all of our servicers from a bookkeeping standpoint.
Oh, yes.
I should be negotiating my bill, her bill down a little bit if we can get this 100%, you know.
Well, absolutely. If you look at, you know, that most of us get, you know, we get these checks, that these deposits that show up in our bank account, and it's a single number that doesn't tell you how much was principal, how much was interest, right? How much was fees, how much was returned from prior advances that we had made. None of that data is available. It's available. You can go log into your 7 services or 7 accounts at Madison, and you can find it,
Yeah.
but it's painful. And then if you decide you want to sell the asset, what's your current unpaid balance? What's your recent pay history? All that data is again available at the servicer. And if you're willing to invest 15, 20 minutes of your life, you can go find all that data, or you can have it at your fingertips. And so that's kind of where we've tried to collect all that data up.
Richard, how about I'm sorry, how about doc generation? You mind touching on that?
Yeah, yes, I want to go there next. Before we jump
Can
there.
I jump into one thing? I just want to kind of, and you keep mentioning, Richard, about, the 15, 20 minutes here, and people need to realize that time adds up significantly.
That's per loan.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I can't tell you, like, people, again, I automate a lot of things, and you work on your business, not in your business. And, you hear that from, I forget which book it is, one of the books everyone tells you to read.
Traction, was that?
No, it's,
oh, no.
yeah, not 4 Hour
I
Work
forget.
Week. Yeah. One of the books, they tell you to work on your business, not in your business, which that's true. I mean, you shouldn't be chasing down, all this little stuff.
Right.
And then even from stuff like here, like if you want to go sell an asset on PaperStack, or on an online portal, everything's probably in here where it's a one-stop shop. Whereas if you log into, for example, Allied, and it's like, okay, in PaperStack, what's the original loan amount? Well, that's not in Allied's portal. Where do you have that information? Oh, it's in my collateral file. Now I have to go open my Windows Explorer, go back, find the collateral, open it up, see where it is, when was it originated, what's the what's the maturity date,
Right.
just, trust me,
Yeah.
I know.
Ask me how I know.
And that could take hours to pull all that data together to make a sale, and that's fine if you're only selling one note, right? If you're only doing one note, this system isn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So before we jump over to DocGen, I just wanted to share just really quickly the assets view. So I changed my view on the screen here just to look at a single note, and the reason I brought it up was for this note, you've got the address and a quick little map. Okay, whoopee. But right here at the top, we've got a summary for the types of things that you would be most interested in every time you go to work on an asset, right? What type of loan is it? What's the loan number? Is it a first lien, a junior lien, that kind of thing? What's the payment? What stage is this current asset in, right? This one here is currently it's a paying loan. What last payment came in December 1st for $766, right? Who the borrower is, who the purchaser and servicer are, how many payments have been received, or what the total value and payments have been received and remits as well. Typically those numbers don't equal each other, as any good note investor realizes. There's a lot of things that come out in fees. And then what's the current unpaid balance? And some of these numbers are enabled by hooking up to the servicer, right? So because we have that data connection, I have the real-time data in here on when the last payment was, the total on remits, and the current unpaid balance. All that's automated because of the connection with the servicer.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
All right, so you wanted to talk about doc generation?
Yeah, if you don't mind touching on that briefly.
Yeah, for sure. So as we started getting into selling our first couple of assets, we realized that there's a lot of steps in collecting all the data, getting it correct, and having all that ready. And then also, as a new note investor, you don't realize there are folks that'll generate these documents for you quite cheaply, but they take, even if you can finally eventually find Chris and Jamie can point you to the right person to do doc generation, it still takes 1 to 2 weeks, and then you have to iterate over the documents as issues are found. So what we found is for the primary transactions, sales transactions, the content is generally about the same for the sale. You've got a sale agreement, you've got a mortgage, you've got an allonge and assignment, and then you maybe have some servicer instructions and a few other items that you want to put out there, depending on how formal you want to be. What we've created here is a simple system to be able to do, basically it's just a doc merge, but it's not, it's basically using the data that's currently in your systems, tracking. It then generates the documents when you're ready, and then you can just print those out or ship them off. We are working on an integration with e-signature so that we can help you with the DocuSign type process. That's not quite done. We're hoping to have that rolled out in Q1.
Nice.
But if I scroll to the bottom of this particular asset, looks like the data is not plugged in on this example, but you basically have these buttons down here at the bottom where you click on the button and it will generate for you the purchase and sale agreement, the assignment, the allonge, the special warranty deed, reconveyance of deed, the instructions to servicer, and the notice of sale receivable. So all these documents will be generated with a click of a button. If you
Now,
need to,
if I have my own document that I want, that I've paid an attorney to help me work up, you can incorporate that as well, right?
absolutely right. Yes, and in fact, we don't provide the documents. We're not lawyers, and we don't get paid to be them. You provide me the documents you'd like to use. We'll get those uploaded for you. Our developer takes about a week to get the first initial documents up and customized, and some people want these different fields bolded and different things like that. Once we get the configuration done, which takes about a week, then the system's ready to go, and you can generate these docs every time you want to use them for any asset.
That's great. Yep, that's something that we're working with you on. So
yeah, excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else with the tool itself you wanted to point out?
A couple other quick steps, things that I do that help me stay on track, just from a systems perspective. Probably I want to go back to a different one. The most important thing for me, the reason I can spend such a small amount of time managing my business every day is because I have one simple view in Podio that I look at once a day. And I'll bring that view up here. This is basically a task list, but I'm not personally a fan of task reminders firing off. Several of my customers like those, and we have a full reminders-based task system that's up and running. But myself personally, I'd rather look at one screen and get my tasks in my face every day. And so this is an example of what I look at. It's basically my assets screen. And the most important part for me is what I call the next step and the follow-up date. And this view here is just sorted by follow-up date. You can see a few days late on a couple of my notes here in Mattoon. We talked about Mattoon earlier. But everything else, the due dates are all there, and you can see what the next steps are, right? So having some method to know what's important and what's not important is critical in this business, because those stacks of paper are large, and remembering what to work on and when to work on it can just waste so much time. So for me, I know I'm late on a couple of assets. Everything else, there's nothing due, nothing to work on.
Yeah, I can say that this is the view that I mean, you showed me this initially, a couple of years ago, and this is where I hang out most of the time.
Yeah.
Next step is more of a, maybe 1 week to 1 month out for me anyway.
Yeah.
And then I do assign tasks to Stephen Berkey and my wife sometimes, but those are generally, those are used differently. So you can kind of use it however you want, but this particular screen is where I find it really valuable.
Did you say you assign your wife tasks?
Well, I mean,
can you teach me how to do that?
She is technically an employee, so we've been joking about whether, because she's going to be, spending more time with my son, but whether she quit or was fired, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's a whole separate podcast episode, or maybe even two.
Absolutely.
We got to get her on.
The other thing that I've been spending a lot of my time on lately is helping investors like Jamie and others that are scaling their business with the basic systems. I don't think, Jamie, you and I have started on that conversation, but several others. Just let's do a systems review. Let's figure out what steps you're spending your time on that are consuming your day, right? And then let's figure out how to automate those steps out of your business, right?
So outside of the PAC system, right?
Yes, absolutely. And in general, most of the systems wind up coming right back here, right? If you're, if you're trying to make automated email outreach, right? I've put a lot of time into that over the last 6 months to make sure that's pretty bulletproof, and we can get you your steps out of the way in your space there. Due diligence steps. What is it I'm working on today? Anyway, point is there's a lot of integrations we can do to help you reduce the steps you're taking every day.
Yeah, it's just like you'll see in Facebook groups or Bigger Pockets, people say, what systems do you use for your note business, or what system do you use? And it's usually 5 to 10 systems that people
right.
list.
It's, I mean, typically though, there's this system. There's, just slipped my mind.
Where you're
CRM.
saving your CRM, and then where you're saving everything.
Yeah.
Whether it's
there's
Drive.
Pipe Drive. I know there's a new software out there that some people started using called ClickUp, which is brand new. Not too familiar with it, but honestly, I've heard positive things about the software. But again, it would still need to be completely customizable for you. It's not, it's similar, I think, like a Podio, where it's a great system, but it's not set up. You would have to do all the setting up, which as a new note investor, it's probably not going to happen and stuff. So those are prime. And then once you get into the servicing software, that's kind of a whole nother different animal.
That's right.
But so Richard, I'm sure people are probably thinking, okay, this is great, but nobody's told me, and you guys are hiding from me, what's this cost?
Yeah.
That's a great question. So we try to keep it really low end for the folks that are just getting started, right? So we've got our lowest package is $24.95 a month. It allows you to have pretty much the unlimited number of notes you want to put in the system. It gives you your basic setup. It lets you track your assets, your purchase and sale activities, all the companies that you work with, and the contacts that you work with. From there, as you decide you want to scale, we have additional packages. Our premium package is $70 a month. With that one, you also have to upgrade to the more advanced Podio version so that you can have some of their automation engine behind it. So that runs on the order of about $100 a month. At that point, you get your automated email, messaging, letters, postcards, that kind of stuff, plus also your doc generation. You can go to noterules.com, go over to the pricing page. It's all up there for view.
And is it spelt just as it sounds? There's no like funky letters in there?
That's right.
Like that?
Note Rules, NOTERULES.com.
Okay. Because I know there was another service that was more of a CRM. I can't think of a gentleman's name, but Note Pros.
Yep, Note Pros is out there. They've got
that's got like the Z at the end, and I was just thinking, okay, there's no like crazy letters, so okay.
That's
Not
right.
promoting them. I don't know them.
No, they're great. They're great guys. They've got a great due diligence system. So there's a couple of other competitors out there that are doing some of what we're doing, but none of them are really focusing on note management. They're focusing on some of the ancillary things like how do you figure out what your due diligence checklist is, and then how do you evaluate 20 notes all at one time and pick just one, right? They're focused in on that acquisition, which is super important. We've talked about partnering together to leverage each other's customers and move things back and forth. So we're definitely doing that. There's other packages out there, but again, I think what people are missing, like you talked earlier about the 3 different areas you focus on with sourcing and asset management, and I forgot your third one.
Sourcing deals and sourcing money. So where do you get the money to buy the deals, right?
Right. But most of them are focused on the asset acquisition. Very few people are focused on actually the asset management and making sure that the deal flow works properly, which is where we focus.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's what a lot of the trainings are focused on: how to buy your first note. And okay, best of luck to you.
Good luck. See you later.
Wait, what? Yeah. That's it. That's really, really interesting. So what, if you don't mind briefly touching on kind of where you're headed for this year and the next year. And I know you already addressed that a little bit with some potential partnerships and things, but where are you looking to move with your business?
Yes, thanks. Appreciate that. So generally, we're working more towards the scaling investor. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to replace or tackle the $20,000, the investor that's willing to invest $20,000 in their systems. That person probably is of a level where they need to have, high-end sales automation, high-end CRM like Salesforce, things like that. And we're not going to ever try to compete with that. Our niche is in the note investing space. We've chosen to stay there, and in the asset investor, between 5 and 150, 200 notes, something like that. We're working heavily on servicer integration, on integration with folks like Note School and PaperStack, to make sure we can transfer assets back and forth between those companies and ourselves and our customers seamlessly. So when you make a sale transaction, you can move that data back and forth. We're working on more of the CRM capabilities so that we can help you with all your customer comms and your sourcing of new leads. We have a lot of that functionality up and running, but making that really bulletproof and tailored to the note business, right? Not just a generic solution that you can then come in and customize. I'd rather make it a one-stop shop that is easy to use and helps you advance your business. That's where we're focused.
Sounds great. I've been really happy with it so far. So I can only imagine it's going to get even better. So
yeah,
it doesn't. I say, Jamie, I know you've been using it. One thing it doesn't do is, I'd say, which is up to you, and that is make sure you have quality when you buy them.
What was that?
Make sure you buy quality assets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's similar
Jamie.
to, people say, what do you think of PaperStack? Just as an example, I love PaperStack. Those guys are great. It really helps you with the, checklist of buying going through the transaction and everything. But I don't put anything on them as far as who you're, doing your own due diligence.
Yeah,
that's
do
right.
your own due diligence on the asset and the person you're dealing with. That's not their problem.
Yeah, and I kind of say that tongue in cheek, but I just want to kind of mention that this is a great system for tracking stuff, but it it helps you manage, but again, it doesn't manage,
That's
for,
right.
For you.
It's kind of like the servicers, right? The new note investor thinks the servicer is going to do everything for them.
Mm-hmm.
And while at a 10,000-foot level, that might be true. And if you don't have any interest in getting payments on time or getting things done quickly, then servicers are great, right? But the reality is you need to manage your business, and a servicer is just one more vendor that you need to stay on top of. Yeah. And how are you keeping yourself organized and not investing all day long every day managing your note business?
Absolutely.
Not only a servicer, it's your attorney, your preservation company.
The guy mowing the lawn, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, thank you for joining us today. Jamie, any final comments?
This has been great. I really appreciate it, Richard. And we'll have to get together so you can kind of go over, we can go over how I'm running my business, not just the note rules part of it, but
there's a lot of things that we can do to help improve and streamline and get rid of those manual steps. Absolutely.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for your time.
Richard, you mentioned people reach out to you at noterules.com. Is that correct? And I mentioned it several times.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. My
oh,
I bumped the mute button. Sorry about that. My email address is richard@Prominent Funding, and Prominent Funding is a big long word. We can put that in the show notes. Prominentfunding.com, and noterules.com is a contact us page there also if you can't find me on email.
Like I can tell you, he's very responsive.
Yeah.
All of this will be in the show notes. So for people interested in more information, make sure to check it out. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast. And as always, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube as well as at your favorite audio listening station. So thank you all, and go out and do some good deeds.